Look, all I've been doing, Annalise, is standing up for the national interest and Australian jobs, standing up for our farmers, those who work in our meat processing firms, those who work in food manufacturing more generally, of course, our barley farmers and others who are concerned that they might be next on the list, and of course our mining companies who also are concerned. There's been some rumblings in both coal and iron ore. So I'm standing up for the national interest and the interest of Australian workers.
Why is it not in the national interest to find out where and when the coronavirus pandemic started, even if that offends China?
Well, it is absolutely in the national interest to have a thorough, independent, arm's-length, international inquiry into the origins of COVID-19 and its spread. And the Labor Party has always supported that proposition, but an effective inquiry must be one which includes China, must be one which includes all nation states, and one driven by the international community. That's what we secured in the end, and that's a welcome thing.
We secured one that doesn't have a time limit on it, and that's a really key issue. If we have to wait until the pandemic's over, that timeline could be anything, and this surely is time sensitive and should start right away.
Well, it would be good to have a timeline on it, but that's not what the international community has agreed, and it's not what Scott Morrison was asking for when he ran out ahead of the pack without discussing the matter with anyone, without giving proper consideration to what the model might look like, without thinking about how you make sure that China is a willing participant, because they are all the things that will make the inquiry successful. And of course, the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, said it can't be done or undertaken by the World Health Organization. Well, that's what's happening. And that is a good thing, because it's the organisation with the relevant expertise to do the job correctly. And of course, there won't be any weapons inspector-style insertions into China. It was a silly thing for Scott Morrison to say, and no wonder the Chinese government was a little upset about it.
This is a pandemic that's ground the global economy to a halt. We're in a worse position than we saw with the Great Depression in the 1930s. Why should we be worried about offending the Chinese at this moment? Shouldn't we just be focused on whatever it takes to make sure this doesn't happen again and we can minimise the loss?
Well, the international community was always going to have an inquiry on it, so it would be just silly to suggest that there wasn't going to be a global inquiry into the origins and the spread of COVID-19. That always happens after the breakout of a pandemic. It was always going to happen this time. It was just unnecessary for our Prime Minister to run out ahead of everyone else and to use such intemperate language with respect to our largest trading partner. Now, China takes 36% of Australia's exports. China is responsible for hundreds of thousands of jobs here in Australia because they buy our goods and services. So if you're going to have an inquiry anyway, and we were always going to do just that, why use such intemperate language against your largest trading partner? You know why he did that, Annalise? Because he was chasing domestic votes. And there's a golden rule in politics: you don't mix your domestic politics with your international and trading relationships.
Does it give you any pause for thought, though, that a lot of what you're saying is the Chinese Communist Party's line? A lot of what you're saying about demonising China, about being ahead of the pack, that's exactly what we've heard the Chinese government say.
Well, Annalise, I'm giving voice to my constituencies. As a shadow minister, I represent both the resources and agriculture sectors, and I'm giving voice to what they are saying to me, and that is that they are very concerned about the way our relationship with China has continued to deteriorate. And of course, many are worried they might be the next to suffer the consequences of decisions made by the Chinese government. I'm also giving voice to my local constituency, a great coal mining region, which of course is largely dependent on that China market. By the way, the Chinese now own more coal mines, or probably ranks just equal first with Glencore as the biggest producer of coal in the Hunter region, and therefore one of two of the biggest employers of coal miners in the Hunter region. So I want to always robustly defend Australia's national interests, but defending our trading interests is akin, the same thing as defending our national interests. We should never kowtow or be anything less than absolutely robust in our discussions with China, always defending and standing up for our own interests, but we've got to be able to walk and chew gum too.
On Friday, Phil Thompson, Liberal MP for Townsville, another big coal seat, was saying you're undermining Australia's sovereignty. He also alluded to your past relations with China and then accused you of being the next Sam Dastyari. What's your response?
Well, Annalise, when you don't have an argument, you start playing the man, don't you? That's an old, failed approach, and of course one you use when you've got nothing else to say. What's happening here, of course, is that the Conservatives, both the Liberal and National Party MPs, are overreaching. For example, David Littleproud calling for my sacking as a frontbencher. They're overreaching because they're under enormous pressure from the agriculture sector in particular, but no doubt from other sectors like food manufacturing, meat processing, for example. They are asking the government, why are you not sticking up for us? Why have you allowed this relationship to deteriorate to the point where we're starting to face sanctions from the government of China? So this is what that's about, Annalise. It seems I'm a bit of a lone voice now, standing up for our farmers, because the National Party is absolutely missing in action, and of course the Liberal Party were never there in the first place.
How is this not undermining Anthony Albanese's position, though, if he's supported the inquiry and pursuing it, even if it does come at a political cost with our relationship with China? If Labor's policy is decided by caucus, you are a frontbencher. How is it appropriate for you to then be undermining that position in public as if you were a backbencher?
Because I supported the inquiry too, Annalise. Every member of the Labor caucus supported the inquiry, as did Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong. So the only thing I've been complaining about is the way in which the Prime Minister went out ahead of other global partners and used intemperate language unnecessarily to call for the inquiry, when the inquiry was always going to happen, Annalise. Again, there's never been any doubt that we're going to have an international inquiry. An international inquiry everyone in the Labor Party supports.